again, welcome back to Foundations of American Democracy. I am Dr. Nicole Warmington Granston. This week, we're going to be looking at the Constitution, the framework of American democracy. With that, I'll be explaining the structure and the meaning of the U.S. Constitution, focusing on the Preamble and Articles 1 to 6. I'll go on and explore how the Constitution establishes American democracy, limited government power, and created the framework of federalism and the separation of powers. So with that, we know that the main goals of today's lecture will be to review the Constitution and its main articles, examine key constitutional clauses, and show how the Constitution shaped American politics and government. So we're going to start off with some key concepts with looking at an overview of the Constitution. The Constitution was signed on September 17, 1787, after months of debate at the Constitutional Convention. It contains 7 articles, multiple sections and clauses, the institutional foundation of American political system. So what we find is that the Constitution established a stronger national government while limiting government power. Next, we have the preamble. Now, the preamble begins with the famous phrase, "We the people." This was revolutionary because government authority came from the people rather than a monarch. Some important themes that came from the preamble are as follows: that of popular sovereignty, government gets its legitimacy from the people, the idea of a more perfect union, that the Constitution aimed to improve the weaknesses of earlier government systems, but we also find some contradictions, right? When you look at the original Constitution, it allowed slavery, excluded women from political participation, and limited voting rights. So with that, we understand that the Constitution promised equality and self-government, but those ideals were not fully applied to everybody at first. Now let's look at Article 1 that addresses Congress. Now, as I just noted, Section 1 basically establishes the legislative branch, and it is the Constitution's longest article. Now, the purpose of Article 1 was to develop a stronger national legislature than they had under the Articles of Confederation, and it also placed limits on government power. Now, some of the major powers of Congress are as follows. They have express powers, which include taxation, declaring war, regulating interstate commerce, coining money, and raising an army. By extension, we see that in Section 8, Clause 18, it contains the necessary and proper clause, which is also called the elastic clause. This allows Congress flexibility to pass laws needed to carry out its responsibilities. Now, why does this matter? This clause greatly expanded congressional power and remains controversial. So what we find is that the elastic clause allows the Constitution to adapt to changing times. We also find that Article 1 provides some limits to Congress. It does not allow Congress to carry out, for example, habeas corpus, meaning that the government cannot imprison people without formally charging them with a crime. Now, we'll move on to looking at Article 2 that deals with the president. This establishes the executive branch and the presidency. Presidential powers include being commander-in-chief, making treaties, granting pardons, appointing officials, and receiving ambassadors. Some very important constitutional features are as follows. The Constitution created the Electoral College system of selecting presidents. Second, we know that it allows for presidential terms. The 22nd Amendment to the United States Constitution limits presidents to 2 terms. In addition, we find that there is a provision for what we'd call presidential succession, meaning that the 25th Amendment of the United States Constitution clarifies which is that the Constitution for high crimes and misdemeanors, though the phrase itself is not clearly defined. Article 3 deals with the courts. Now, Article 3 establishes the judicial branch and the Supreme Court. The key features of Article 3 are that Congress creates lower federal courts, judges serve during good behavior, which is a life tenure, and the judiciary interprets laws and the Constitution. The Constitution does not explicitly mention judicial review, but the Supreme Court gained this power through the Marbury versus Matheson case. Now, what does judicial review mean? The Supreme Court can declare laws and government actions unconstitutional. So with that, it made the court a powerful interpreter of the Constitution. Now, Article 4, that deals with relations between the states, actually establishes the rules governing, as I said, the relationship among states. The main principles are that of full faith and credit, where states must respect the laws and the legal decisions of other states, that of privileges and immunities, where citizens from one state must be treated equally in other states, that of the admission of new states, that Congress can admit new states to the Union, and that of the Republican government, that the federal government guarantees each state a Republican form of government. Article 5 deals with amendments. So the amendment process is as follows. An amendment requires 2/3 approval in Congress and the ratification being made by 3/4 or 3/4 of the state. As a result, we find that the Constitution is flexible but difficult to change. We've seen that where only 27 amendments have been adopted despite thousands being proposed. So we find that this amendment process balances stability with change. And finally, Article 6, which is the law of the land. Article 6 actually establishes the Supremacy Clause. Now, the Supremacy Clause basically notes that the Constitution and federal laws override conflicting state laws. It also provides for religious freedom, where it prohibits religious tests for federal office. Why does this matter? Because it strengthened religious liberty and the separation between religion and the government. Now, some core takeaways I wanted to have for today's lecture is that 1, the Constitution created the framework of American democracy, that government authority comes from the people, the separation of power prevents the concentration of power. We see where the elastic clause gives flexibility to government powers, that judicial review made the Supreme Court highly influential, that federal law is supreme over state law, and that the Constitution balances stability with adaptability. So with all of this, we do know that the Constitution still shapes modern American politics and debates. Thank you.